to update the ad hoc committee for the third time in the work that has been undertaken in the education sector in response to COVID-19. There have been a number of important developments over the past weeks, and I wish to consolidate matters by making a statement today. We are now just over 3 months from the beginning of lockdown, throughout which all areas of society have been dealing with great challenges. The issues we are facing in education have never been encountered before. An incredible amount of work has gone into the development of policies and procedures to ensure that we continue to meet the learning needs of our pupils as best we can. I would like to begin again by paying tribute to school principals, teachers, classroom assistants, and indeed all those who have been working hard with such dedication in the wider educational sector at this challenging time. In my previous appearances before the committee, I provided an update on a range of complex issues that have been addressed since lockdown. In recent weeks, those efforts have continued as we look to the future and put in place plans for the summer and the new school day. Whilst our response is ongoing, it's important that we begin planning for restart and recovery and a process of phased reopening of our schools in a safe and effective manner when conditions allow. Before I get onto some of the detail of these future plans, I would like to provide an update on a number of key issues. In my updates to the committee in May, I advised members of the launch of an income support scheme for substitute teachers who have been unable to avail of any financial support through government schemes related to COVID-19. The Department launched the income support scheme for substitute teachers on the 19th of May, with a closing date for applications of the 26th of May. I can advise that 1,650 substitute teachers will receive income through the scheme in June, and the vast majority of those receive payments through the DE pay run on the 16th of June. A process is also in place to take any individual special circumstances into account, and where applicable, payments will be made through the scheme for these in the July pay run. While the full cost of the scheme will not be known until late July, the cost will be lower than anticipated, mainly as not all those who were entitled to apply for the scheme did so. Both substitute and permanent teachers will also receive the 2 years' pay arrears due for the 2017-2019 pay settlement in the June pay run. Mr Speaker, on the 16th of April, I set out the details of the alternative arrangements for awarding GCSE, AS and A-level qualifications. These arrangements placed a high degree of trust in our teaching profession, and I know teachers were very aware of their responsibility towards their pupils. Despite the enormity of the tasks, schools met the tight deadlines set for submitting the centre-assessed grades to the Council for the curriculum, examinations and assessment. These data are now going through a process of standardisation to ensure that the final outcomes are as fair as well as robust. While there is still some way to go through various stages of checking and validation, CCEA is on track to have results issued in the original published dates in August for all pupils, including private candidates. I want to thank every teacher and school leader involved in this process. This has been an enormous challenge, and I'm very proud of the way that our teachers rose to that challenge to ensure their students will be able to progress to the next stage of their lives in September. While the work on awarding this year has been progressing, my department has commissioned CCEA to bring forward proposals for examinations in the next academic year. If anything, given the uncertainty surrounding the public health situation, this is an even more complex planning process than the arrangements for this year. Account needs to be taken of the impact of lost teaching time on students, as well as considering the impact of any restrictions on teaching and assessment arrangements in the next academic year. For example, how will social distancing impact on different types of assessments that make up qualifications, and what adjustments, if any, can be made without impacting the integrity and therefore the value of those qualifications. The work will carry on over the summer, and more information will be made available at the earliest opportunity. However, while the work is still being progressed, the starting point is that exams are the best, fairest and most accurate way of awarding qualifications. So every effort must be made to make sure exams take place. CCEA is progressing plans for the normal November exam series, taking account of the evolving public health guidance. This series involves only a small cohort of pupils, normally those taking GCSE single and double award science, so will provide an opportunity to monitor any adaptations to exam arrangements. Any lessons that can be drawn from this exam series will be used to further refine the planning for the remaining series in 2021. Earlier this week, I published guidance for schools on curriculum planning for the 2021 academic year. The guidance provides advice and support for schools as they consider how to tailor and adapt delivery of the curriculum to support recovery when pupils return for the new academic year. My department has also commissioned CCEA and ETI to provide further guidance to schools on effective ways in which the curriculum could be planned for, implemented and assessed in the new academic year. These guidance documents will set out ways in which existing resources can be used to support remote and blended learning approaches and provide exemplars of current practice and resources that schools can adapt to reflect their circumstances. This guidance will add to the wide range of resources which have been collated, developed and disseminated to support school leaders and teachers over the period of the pandemic. We're currently fortunate that the Northern Ireland curriculum is specifically designed to be adaptable and dynamic, and is therefore the ideal scaffold to support and underpin teaching and learning. Limited prescription gives schools flexibility to choose what to teach, for how long and how often, and to use the approaches that best suit their pupils. The key message across the system is that the aim for 2021 is to support pupils to be motivated to learn and to become competent and independent learners through a curriculum that gives equal emphasis to knowledge, understanding and skills. I want to thank all those teachers and staff who are working so hard to ensure our pupils are supported at this time, and hope that they will find the guidance that has been provided by the Department and our delivery partners helpful in supporting their planning. In my previous statement to the Committee, I advised of the £12 million emergency package for childcare provision for key workers and the associated establishment of the Childcare Support Scheme. Application forms were issued to both open and closed daycare and school-aged childcare settings on the 6th of May. Application forms for the approved home childcare scheme and support for childminders were issued on the 7th of May. In order to allow the maximum opportunity for applicants to be received, the closing date for applications for closed settings was extended until the 12th of June. Funding for the current COVID-19 Childcare Support Scheme ends on the 30th of June, and demand for childcare and expenditure across all elements of the scheme are being monitored in line with the available budget. The amounts actually paid out under childcare scheme are determined by the volume and nature of the applications that are submitted by the sector and by the assessment of eligible costs. Despite support being put in place to assist applicants and the closing date being extended, only 46% of closed settings applied. The Department of Health and Education continue to work with the Childcare Reference Group on the reasons for the smaller than expected number of applicants received. Initial findings suggest that many settings were in seat of financial support from other sources. A number of applications are still to be processed for the period in April and May, in addition to the payments for June, so this amount will increase over coming weeks. I will come to plans for the childcare sector recovery later in my statement. Turning to arrangements for the summer period and beyond. The current arrangements for educational supervision in schools for vulnerable children and children of key workers will end on the 30th of June, and support for vulnerable children and children of key workers will need to be reshaped for the summer. I am grateful for the support and provision provided by teachers and principals since the 23rd of March 2020, when schools in Northern Ireland closed for all children except for children deemed vulnerable and the children of key workers. Teachers and principals deserve a break over the summer, and we are therefore looking at alternative support mechanisms. The well-being of children and young people remains our primary concern, and I recognise that certain groups may continue to need support during the summer months. But with the focus shifting from educational to play and leisure activities for vulnerable children and the children of key workers. To mitigate the impact of ending the emergency educational scheme, I have gained the Executive's agreement to a number of measures which could support summer activities for these children and young people. I can confirm that the Education Authority is currently working on with a number of special schools to make summer provision for 2020. It should be noted that this will not be in the usual format of previous years, given the impact of the pandemic. The EA is working in partnership with special schools to provide ideas and activities online for pupils, and also some tailored school-based summer schemes. The EA will provide further details shortly. Although generic non-targeted youth work provision ceased in March, the Education Authority and youth organisations have worked closely to ensure the needs of vulnerable children and young people continue to be addressed. Statutory Youth Service will continue to provide support to vulnerable young people as part of the ongoing response. In addition to existing support, Statutory Youth Services will provide some additional small group work along with some further targeted outreach and detached work. There is now an opportunity for voluntary sector youth providers, uniformed organisations and private sector providers to deliver limited summer programmes, prioritising key workers aged 9 to 13 that are consistent with public health restrictions that are in place. This will complement existing online youth services. Many voluntary youth workers funded by the Education Authority are maintaining contact with their members online and developing creative solutions to deliver the curriculum, for example, in the creative sense. It is anticipated that this will continue during July and August. Feedback from the Youth Centre indicates that youth workers are keen to support young people over the summer. We recognise that there are associated issues with adherence to public health guidance, training of volunteers and staff to ensure compliance, individual personal concerns for some staff and volunteers, and having appropriate insurance cover. Departmental guidance for safe working in all educational settings in Northern Ireland was issued by the Department on the 4th of June. This has been shared with the youth sector and will be made available to all involved in the running of summer schemes. Work was also commenced to develop additional specific youth guidance. The provision of summer programmes will be conditional upon compliance with Department of Education safe work guidance and the relevant permissions in respect of the 5-stage recovery plan. The disruption to our children's learning caused by COVID-19 cannot be overestimated, and I'm considering how to bring forward projects to support learning for children over the summer and indeed beyond. I will also brought forward a project called Engage to provide literacy and numeracy support, mental health interventions and the widening of nurture support for the 2021 academic year in socially deprived areas. I would like now to turn to the issue of free school meals, which have been the subject of considerable recent public debate, particularly in relation to concerns that some children will go hungry over the summer period. Direct payments in lieu of free school meals are scheduled to cease on the 30th of June. Subject to availability of funding, the Executive has agreed that a similar but separate summer food scheme would be established to alleviate hardship over the summer months for the families of children entitled to free school meals direct payments. Details on how the scheme will be delivered are being finalised and will be published shortly. In addition, I plan to extend and expand the Education Authority's Eat Well, Live Well programme to provide healthy breakfasts and lunches to around 5,000 vulnerable young people. Mr Deputy Speaker, the provision of home-to-school transport in September will be extremely complex and a challenging area of work. So any form of social distancing will have an impact on the ability of the Education Authority to transport all children to school by bus or by taxi. The Education Authority is making every effort to maximise the number of children that can be safely transported. However, if any restrictions remain in place in social distancing, there is likely to be a substantial shortfall between the number of pupils who are eligible for home-to-school transport and the number of places available on vehicles. And that impact will undoubtedly be likely to be felt across all school sectors. So I'm currently looking at all options that could help mitigate the disruption that will be caused for many families, and my officials and those of the Education Authority are working tirelessly with a range of key stakeholders on this issue. Mr Speaker, childcare is a key priority within the education restart, and as well as being of the utmost importance in enabling parents to get back to work, get into the working environment, a paper on childcare sector recovery planning was discussed and agreed by the Executive on the 18th of June. The Childcare Recovery Plan aims to restore the childcare sector to pre-COVID-19 capacity levels as quickly and as safely as possible. The aim of the plan is to ensure that parents can access childcare as and when they need it over the next few months. The widening of the key worker definition on the 8th of June and further on the 16th of June has been the first step in reopening of the sector. In addition, in recognition of the need for childcare provision to align with the executive decision-making in relation to parents being able to return to work, from the 29th of June, the definition of key worker will no longer apply for access to childcare, so it will be open to everyone. This will assist in the return to full capacity by enabling more providers to reopen, more parents to access registered childcare. Childminders can care for children for 4 families in July and from August 5 families. There is no minimum or maximum number that a childcare setting can accommodate. However, childcare providers must adhere to the Department of Health's COVID guidance, which sets out the expectations on providers in terms of adherence to public health and infection control advice. For childcare settings, the guidance makes it clear that children should be cared for within play pods of up to 12 children, and pods should be kept apart. The layout of play pod should comply with the minimum space per child requirements in the minimum standards. This would mean that some settings will not be able to operate at full capacity, although that will depend upon how they organise the setting and the extent to which they can maximise the use of outdoor space. The Childcare Recovery Plan includes financial support for childcare providers to reopen. Further funding will be subject to an executive agreement, and the detail of a funding support scheme is being developed. In childcare terms, the announcement by the executive on the 22nd of June, allowing up to 6 people meeting indoors, will provide some flexibilities for families to access childcare support from another family member or a friend, and thus provide informal childcare provision. Mr. Speaker, we are all too aware of the stresses felt by our teachers, our parents and our pupils due to the ongoing disruption and uncertainty regarding the future. The COVID-19 pandemic has presented significant challenges right across society and has been particularly difficult for children and young people, parents and carers and the education workforce. About half our schools have remained open for children of key workers and vulnerable children, although, as in other parts of the UK, the numbers of vulnerable children has been low. Many of these children particularly benefit from the structured support of a school setting away from often a challenging home environment, which is why supporting such children has been a key priority. We won't know the final impact of the current crisis on children's safety, well-being and learning at this stage, but it is clear that the longer children remain out of school, the slower recovery of lost learning. My strategic objective is to see the full-time resumption of classroom-based learning for all pupils as soon as possible when it is safe to do so. Education is of vital importance for our children and our young people, not only in terms of their lifelong opportunities, but also for their emotional well-being and development, and for the fabric of wider society, including the economy. My department is working on a restart programme which focuses on physical protection, well-being, vulnerable learners and special educational needs services, standards in learning, the new school day and childcare. Education restarts involves significant collaboration and co-design, and there is ongoing engagement with school principals, trade unions, managing authorities and sectoral bodies representing the various school sectors, parenting organisations and children and young people. Education Restart is also supported by the Public Health Agency and the Department of Health. Education recovery planning is currently based on the broad assumption that the education system will not be able to return to business as usual from day one. An immediate priority is therefore the development of strategic guidance for practical arrangements for the safe reopening of schools in August. I want to place on record my appreciation for the work of the Practitioners Group, which has worked tirelessly to co-design the new school day framework guidance, by which schools will plan reopening. The group delivered finalised guidance, which was considered and endorsed by the Executive on the 18th of June, published on the 19th of June, representing a significant step forward in the process of planning for the safe reopening of schools. The guidance is day one focus and will be supplemented by a range of additional operational guidance papers covering a wide range of matters such as transport, catering, curriculum and early years arrangements. I want to make an important clarification arising from the Executive's endorsements on the guidance and the social distancing assumptions under which planning for reopening schools will be planned. The decision of the Executive was that schools should take a planning assumption of 2 metres social distancing among adults and between adults and the pupils they are working with, and 1 metre between pupils, which can and should, where possible, be further mitigated by use of protective bubbles, in essence, contained, consistent groups of pupils kept together to limit transmissions and movements within school settings. The Executive has decided that the 1 metre social distancing assumption will apply to all year groups, within a school setting up to Year 14 inclusive. The practitioner group has reflected on the Executive's decision and acknowledged that while protective bubbles will not be applied to Years 11 to 14, the reduced instances of contact across the whole school through use of a bubble strategy in Years 8 to 10 would be a mitigating factor against transmission and would therefore provide appropriate rationale for applying 1 metre distancing across all year groups. I'm grateful to the group for the professional insight they have brought into the consideration of this matter and how, from a practical perspective, it will assist with their planning decisions. I'm conscious that every school building and every classroom is different. Therefore, the guidance is not prescriptive. School leaders will be best placed to consider the guidance and implement them based upon their own circumstances. We are all aware of the challenges of physical distancing. These challenges are particularly acute within educational settings. The ongoing need for physical distancing will impact on how school returns in terms of classes, sizes, attendance pattern, kitting arrangements and school day structure. Of course, these measures are designed to be deployed when schools return in August and September and will need to be reviewed in advance of the new school term to ensure that they align with the wider public health position at that point. In all of our work, we continue to be guided by the medical and scientific arrangements. We do remain in a fluid situation. My overriding aim remains a full return for every pupil to classroom learning full-time. The restart arrangements that I have outlined reflect the current position, but my hope remains that if the wider public health situation continues to improve, further decisions will be able to be taken before the start of the new term to enable schools to resume classroom teaching for all students full-time, subject to protections to mitigate risk and to protect public health. In closing, Mr Speaker, the challenges we are dealing with in education are unprecedented. Although our overall the COVID-19 virus must rightly remain cautious, the work towards education restart is a positive step in our wider recovery. I would like to thank again all school leaders, teachers, non-teaching staff and parents for their continued work to support not just our vulnerable people and the children of key workers, but the tens of thousands of pupils in our education system.